So our next set of speakers are Barbara Muntyan and Jim McGlasson. Originally, Barb was going to talk on the vanadinite and other localities around Charleston, aka the Gallagher Vanadium. But since that time, some new additional Baghdad specimens came to light at the April show. So she asked to change her talk to revisiting Baghdad. Jim did a lot of the analysis work, and he's going to speak to that. Again, Barb has been a long-time contributor to our symposium. You know, she spent the first 20 or 30 years in Colorado and collecting Colorado minerals, because after all, when you're in Colorado, you know, you're going to go out and dig quartz because that's all you got to do. Fortunately, she moved down here, 20 years ago now. And unfortunately for some of us other Arizona collectors, she has put the same determination and doggedness into her Arizona collection that she used to put into her Colorado collection. So I think there's probably a dozen or so specimens that both Evan and I covet in her collection today, which is the ultimate compliment that I can pay to any collection. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Barbara Muntyan, Jim McGlasson, a longtime Tucson collector, expert in mineral analysis, and we're glad to have both of you here.
Well, some of you may wonder why I wanted to do a redo on Baghdad. Some of you may know that I wrote an article for Record on the development and history and the minerals of Baghdad, and I did the research in the 2010 to 12 time frame, and Wendell published it in the Arizona 6 supplement. Wendell's philosophy is if you write an article on the history and development of a mine, it ought to be the last word. And I certainly try to make it the last word. The only problem is Baghdad is an operating mine. It changes daily. And there were some major developments that took place after I finished the article. So what I'm going to do today is go through kind of a quick review of the history and the specimens that one normally expects to find in the oxide zone of copper porphyry, and then talk about the new minerals, because they're so different you won't think they come from the same mine. Just a couple of thank yous to Dave Korsendorfer and his wife Barbara. They disseminated Eric Laskowski's collection after he passed away. Eric was the pit geologist at Baghdad for about a dozen years, died unexpectedly, and Dave was left to pick up the pieces. Jim helped him with that, and he also volunteers at the museum. He does a lot of the ramen work there, so he's going to talk about that. I have Wendell thanked up there, because Wendell doesn't really like to have second acts on articles, but he was intrigued with this one, so he's somebody detonated, and you'll see Scoville took all the pictures. I'm going to go through some of these slides fairly quickly. Some of you know Baghdad. I've always been fond of this mine. It's a small copper porphyry. It's about 100 miles northwest of Phoenix, and it's really isolated. Years ago, I was a member of a tour group from the Mining History Association, went up there on Sunday. There are 60 college professors in a tour bus, and these guys were going, "Oh, company, we have somebody to talk to." So it's isolated up there. It's an interesting mine because it was the only one of the major copper porphyries in Arizona that was developed without benefit of a major mining company. The Baghdad Copper Company was not a major mining company like Cypress or Phelps Dodge or some of the others. Baghdad is right there on the border, Yavapai County. Anyway, these two maps are going to be difficult, I think, to see, but, and I don't know that this wants to do it for me. This is a picture of the pit from Google Earth prior to 2016. And what's important to notice is you've got this big dip in the pit, the semicircular. That follows the contours of Copper Creek. And when they were developing the pit, they followed those contours all the way down because some of the mineralization was there. But it's a weird way to design a pit with it looks like a lima bean. And this is a picture of the pit in 2016, and it doesn't show as well as I would like. This has been flattened out. They've basically taken Copper Creek away and peeled away. The intention was to expand the pit in all directions and rationalize the contours. In the process of taking out that knob, which is known as Drew Point, that was the source of a lot of the mineral specimens from the early days. Bruce Barlow had 2 5-year back-to-back collecting contracts there, and that was basically the area that people assumed that the specimens came out of, and they did. This is just a little history of the development. It was patented in the 1880 era, the first patents, but it really didn't get going with mining until after World War I. Okay. It doesn't want to go forward. Anybody got an opinion?
That is the center. Okay. Just
Okay.
the center.
Okay, thank you. The reason why the decision was made to take out Drew Point can be seen in this photograph. This is one of their big excavators, and you can see there's a great big slab that's come down and just sloughed off from Drew Point. This high wall failures happened all the time, and they had to clean them up to continue mining. So it was a real problem. When Freeport took over the mine, they finally decided to do something about it. Okay, got an idea? I'm right over in the middle of it.
Position your thumb, hold it like that.
Okay, thank you. This is another view of the pit. This whole area has come down, and that's a lot of waste rock to remove. So the decision was made to go ahead and take down Drew Point. I am having, he may have, or I've broken it.
Where's Harlem? What year was that, Barb?
That, it was probably, I don't know if, for absolute certain, it was someplace in the 90s, I think.
Trying to go forward.
Yeah, unless you want
There it
to.
is.
Okay. The Drew Point is the benches that are sticking out into the pit. So that's the area that's going to come down. What they discovered when Freeport started taking down Drew Point was there was a big diatreme that they didn't know existed at the base of Drew Point. Now, a diatreme is basically an upwelling of magma that comes in contact with the surrounding rock and breaks it up. There's a lot of brecciation around the margins, and it typically can form bugs with new minerals. And so that's what happened, but they didn't know about it until they got down to that level. Next. So what I want to do is do a quick run through of some of the specimens that we all are familiar with from Baghdad, and then you'll see on the new specimens how different that is. A pretty chrysocolla with quartz over it. Next. This is the Desert Museum specimen, number 2, from Rukenjelks. Next. This is Harvard's. They clearly are from the same general area in the pit in the early days. Next. This is some of the lapidary material that Bruce Barlow collected, and beautiful stuff. Next. Some more of it, and you can see how very complex azurite, malachite, chrysocolla. These are 2 of the fishtail twins that are well known. They're technically not from the pit, they're from the Bruce mine, which was south of the pit. They're both the lesser specimens. Next. This is a malachite pseudomorph on matrix. It was actually, once upon a time, Rukenjelks owned it. Okay, next. This is conocalcite on malachite on chrysocolla. It's a great specimen. It's Paul Harder's. Another malachite. Next. Yeah. Another one. This is a Japan Law twin. Again, used to be a location just outside the margins of the pit. And a large chalcopyrite. Okay. Now, that's what people, I think, have come to expect as specimens from Baghdad. It's worth knowing that the pit had already gone past the oxide zone and was into the sulfide zone by the time that chalcopyrite was found. So one normally doesn't think of having new well-crystallized specimens after that point, but let's look at some of them. Okay, this is chrysocolla coating quartz. It was collected after the blast of May 15th, 2010, and it was one of the earliest specimens that Eric Laskowski found. As the pit geologist after the blast, he was supposed to map to see if they were blasting in the right place, and he also was a collector, so he collected. That's one of them. Next. This is another one from that same time frame. Okay. This would be probably typical of a lot of the specimens. It was quartz with small sulfides, little pyrites, chalcopyrites, chalcocites. Not a great specimen, but certainly typical of what you might expect to find at that level. Okay, next. These are larger pyrites, again, from November of 2010. The specimen's probably, 2.5 inches across. Okay, next. This is one of the is a delightful specimen. Unfortunately, it's not mine. I wish it were. That's an amethyst in the tip of that quartz. And as far as I know, that's the only instance of amethyst having been found at Baghdad. It's a great little specimen. It's about 3 inches from end to end, and no damage. I will say that these vugs were collected very skillfully. Eric didn't seem to beat up things. Okay, next. Here's a quartz covered with double terminated pale yellow calcites. If you look up close at those calcites, they might as well have come from Kansas or tri-state district, and sit on a galena cube. They are just so unusual. First reported instance of yellow calcite from Baghdad. The quartzes are unremarkable, but they're up to about 1.75 inches long. This was apparently a large vug, and I think that it was probably a series of vugs that were collected, because they're from the 2900 bench, the 33,000 bench, and they form not only the calcites on the quartz, but also with dolomite next. This is another one, much larger quartz crystals, but does that look like an Arizona specimen from a copper mine? Nah. This is dolomite. It's not pink, but it's readily identifiable. Curved, pearlescent, saddle-shaped crystals. This is apatite. Again, one doesn't expect to find apatites. They were reported up to 2 inches long, but I haven't seen any that large. The larger crystal is probably about 1 inch across. And it was from an area just to the east of where the diatreme was being removed. The micas are phlogopite. Okay, next. There's another one, double terminated. And they have they're not gemmy, but they at least are reasonably lustrous. Okay. This is a specimen, was the first one I picked out. It's a double terminated quartz crystal that's about 3 inches long. Pyrite and chalcopyrite are ubiquitous in this area of the lower levels of the pit, but the quartzes are common, but they form all different kinds of habits. Some of them are compressed. They almost look like Charcas calcites. Some of them are nice and euhedral and well-formed. This is the biggest quartz that I've found. There was a reference made to the mineral show in April. There was a sale of specimens by the Korsendorfers for the estate of Eric Laskowski, and I was able to go there early, and they knew I was interested in Baghdad, so they very kindly had segregated out the Baghdad flats, but Eric worked all over the U.S. and mainly in the Southwest, and he collected all over the country, wherever he was. So there was a fair number of specimens, but they've mostly been dispersed as of this point. There may be some more that come out from Dana Slaughter, bought the remainder of the collection. Next. Okay, now those are the larger size specimens. Some of the more interesting things that came out from this diatreme are the microminerals. And I'm going to turn it over to Jim so he can talk about the little things.
Well, this story starts actually back in mid-60s when I was in grad school and working underground at, first job was in Grants, New Mexico. And one of my professors said, don't forget the little things. Because mineral specimens and mineral collecting is nature's expression of physical chemistry. All these diagrams and things that we looked at in physical chemistry, stability fields, all of that has to do with why we end up with certain suites of minerals. And so I worked for Phelps Dodge for a while and got some lessons from Dr. Sidney Williams. And what his thought was, if you looked at what there was on a mine property, you could tell an awful lot about what the system was that created it. And these systems are what's important to understand what else may be there. So that was the start of a career in exploration geology. So we got these specimens, and I got to tell you about these photos first. Don't worry about these photos are my first try at trying to photograph through the microscope on the Raman, which is 100x. And this is using a little adapter in my cell phone.
We're all there.
So, they're not, these are like old-time micromount photos that are not all in focus because there's no way you can stack a cell phone photo taken through the eyepiece of a microscope. So we'll have to live with what I could do. This is the labethanite. I just started it with it trying to check to make sure it really was labethanite. You notice there's the dark crystals down here and the lighter green up here. Those are both labethanites. One has a little more transparency because the crystals are sitting where they get reflected light from behind. There's also a little white ball down here with a little brown spots in it. That ball was unknown, so I tried to use the Raman on it. That brown spot is where it burned it up. That's a 2-micron hole burned all the way through that. And we turned the Raman down to where we're only using 1% power and it still burned through it. So right now it's labethanite and question mark. All things don't work with any one of these methods. So in looking at some of the calcites, they have several periods of growth on the calcite. And one period has kind of a sugary looking quartz and calcite. And looking at them in my binoc, I saw some little flashes of pink. And I thought to myself, whoa, that sure looks like rhodochrosite color. So get them up on those pink crystals are 20 microns across. I have not been able to dig one of them out, but I could analyze them with the Raman. And they're manganese-bearing calcite. They are not, the peaks haven't shifted sufficiently to make it be rhodochrosite. And kutnoorite has a structural difference, order-disorder thing. So yes, those are Manganese bearing, I haven't got them under the SEM. I haven't been able to pick one out sufficiently separate to get it on the SEM to find out what the manganese to calcium ratio is. Chris, what's
Here, you tell me when and I'll get her going.
all right. Then, in looking through this stuff, we also found these little brown things that look, and they gave a rare earth signature on the Raman. And so kept looking at those, and finally I found one we could actually photograph and see the crystal form. These are parasite CE. Those two little white balls on the pyrite are calcite. They're 20 microns. That's a selenite. The vug there is a 0.5 millimeter. This is siderite. Some of those are yellow like that. Some of them are bright orange. And they're sitting on a black mica that was labeled on the label was biotite. Well, if you're going to use biotite, you need to say biotite group, because there is no species biotite anymore. They've messed with the micas just like they did the pyroxenes and amphiboles. So those are in the apatite. If you remember Barb's picture of the apatite, it had all kinds of white stuff on there along with the nice apatite crystals. Well, that's where I started looking. When I get something like that, I'm curious as to what else is there. And the first thing I found were these things. And then I got to thinking about the mica. Well, we ought to be able to tell what the mica is. So I ran the mica on the Raman, and it looked more like anite than phlogopite. Anite's the iron end member of that series, and phlogopite is the magnesium end member. So you've got iron, magnesium substituting for each other in that whole series of micas. So I was doing some other things, and I had this specimen that had a piece of the black mica on it in the EDS, and so we checked the iron to magnesium ratio, and there's 2% iron and 12% magnesium, so that makes it phlogopite. That, I think, is monazite CE. That's what I get on a Raman off of some other crystals. But this is the only thing I could get to. That little white patch there is 20 microns across. But all these rare earth minerals, all these other things, part of that is helping to define the system that created these deposits and how the system changes with time, which is, in an exploration sense, is critically important. I think that's it. I don't know, I didn't take that picture.